हेलो एवरीवन। वेलकम टू माय यूट्यूब चैनल द सोलफुल डायरी। आज के वीडियो में हम बात करेंगे रॉबर्ट फ्रॉस्ट की पोम मेंडिंग वॉल के बारे में। पोएट के बारे में हम प्रीवियस वीडियो में डिस्कस कर चुके हैं, जिसका लिंक डिस्क्रिप्शन में है। पोम को इन डेप्थ डिस्कस करने से पहले जान लेते हैं उसके कुछ की फीचर्स। Poem Mending Wall, like most of Robert Frost's poem, is situated in the New England countryside. It is a poem which dramatizes the conflicting attitudes and personalities of two neighbors, both presumably New England farmers. The central issue of conflict is the wall which divides the land of two neighbors. As the title of the poem suggests, the wall has to be mended from time to time, and the neighbors mutually decide on a particular day to mend the wall from either side. The poem is presented from the point of view of the narrator, who begins by speculating on the causes for the ruptures in the wall. It begins as the natural irritation of a busy farmer who is bothered about a common enough problem, mending a broken wall. But he feels that there is something beyond natural causes and the work of hunters which makes such large gaps in the walls. This something, he insists, does not want walls between people. Here we notice how easily Frost moves from naturalistic description to philosophic speculation. Wondering about the something that does not love a wall, the narrator starts to question the logic of having a wall between him and his neighbor. Since they grow different things, there is no possibility of their lands getting mixed up, nor do they have cattle, which would necessitate the wall. His neighbor, however, refuses to consider the possibility, relying on an oft repeated phrase which he had learned from his father: good fences make good neighbors. The neighbor in the poem offers the contrary position. The narrator sees him as an old fashioned, rather humorless person who holds conservative opinions. He refuses to think for himself, relying on the wisdom of his ancestors. Thus, the neighbor we notice is presented less positively than he narrator, who comes across as friendly, liberal, inquisitive, and thoughtful. However, we must remember that the poem is written from the point of view of the narrator, and the neighbor is not only presented through the eyes of the narrator, he is also only allowed to speak one sentence in the poem. Though the narrator dismisses the statement as an old saying, the statement still stands as an effective contrary position to the narrator's plea. For breaking down walls, the statement insists on the necessity of a fence, not a wall, and this fence could stand as a valid symbol for privacy. The narrator's insistence on breaking down barriers has validity. The poem, the claim for the importance of privacy to build up a good relationship can be read as equally valid. When one first reads the poem, one tends to accept the point of view of the narrator as the poet's voice. Frost, however, insists on distancing himself from the narrator by subtly allowing the neighbor's statement to provide an effective contrast to the narrator's position. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that sends the frozen groundswell under it and spills the upper boulders in the sun and makes gaps even two can pass abreast. The work of hunters is another thing. I have come after them and made repair where they have left not one stone on a stone, but they would have the rabbit out of hiding to please the yelping dogs. The narrator begins the poem by insisting that there is something which is against walls. This something manages to make the frozen ground swell right under the wall and thus topples the stones, making such huge gaps in it that two people could walk together through it. He further insists that these gaps are not the same as the big gaps the hunters make while chasing rabbits with their dogs. Answer 2. The gaps I mean, no one has seen them mate or hurt them mate. That spring, mending time, we find them here. I let my neighbor know beyond the hill, and on a day we meet to walk the line and set the wall between us once again. We keep the wall between us as we go to each the boulders that have fallen to each, and some are loaves and some so nearly balsa. We have to use a spell to make them balance. Stay where you are until our backs are turned. We wear our fingers rough with handling them. Oh, just another kind of outdoor game. On fun on a side, it comes to little more. While speculating about the broken wall, the narrator had digressed into a detailed description of the rabbit chase. In this stanza, he comes back to the problem of the gaps. This stanza gives a detailed description of their mutual arrangement of mending the wall on a specified day. Once they note the gaps, they decide to meet on a specific day and each keeping to his side of the wall starts erecting the wall once again. For the narrator, who is inquisitive and observant, it becomes a kind of an outdoor game. He notes the various shapes of the smooth rocks. He even addresses them playfully and thus manages to be cheerful in a situation which requires hard work. The three, they were it is we do not need the wall. He's all mine and I'm an apple orchid. My apple trees will never get across and eat the cones under his spines, I tell him. He only says, good fences make good neighbors. Spring is the mischief in me, and I wonder if I could put a notion in his head. Why do they make good neighbors? Isn't it where there are cows? But here there are no cows. Before I built a wall, I would ask to know what I was walling in or walling out, and to whom I was like to give offense. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that wants it down. The narrator in this stanza points out the fact that in their specific context, a wall seems to be equally unnecessary. He has an apple orchard and a neighbor has a pine plantation. When he attempts to communicate this playfully to his neighbor, he only gets a terse phrase out of him that good fences make good neighbors. The narrator does not give up, attributing it to spring mischief, and argues further with his neighbor, pointing out to him that neither of them have cattle, which would make a wall necessary. He also tries to teach him not to erect barriers without thinking. In the last three lines of the stanza, the narrator decides on his position. He openly decides with that something that does not love a wall. The narrator moves through a wide range of emotions in the stanzas, from playfully mischief to amused condescension to an attempt to teach to a serious statement where he makes his choice against thoughtless barriers. Stanza 4. I could say Alps to him, but it's not Alps exactly, and I would rather he said it to for himself. I see him there, holding a stone grasped firmly by the top in each hand. Like an old stone savage armed, he moves in darkness as it seems to me. Not of woods only and the shade of trees. He will not go behind his father's saying. He likes having thought of it so well, he says again, good fences make good neighbors. The last stanza continues with the narrator's attempts to make his neighbor think for himself about destroying barriers. In the last stanza, the narrator is no longer in a mischievous mood. He, in fact, passes judgment on his neighbor. For the first time in the poem, the reader is allowed to catch a glimpse of the neighbor. But one must remember that it's through the eyes of the narrator. The narrator sees him as an old, stone aged man. He deliberately uses the negative word savage to describe him. The darkness surrounding the neighbor is not merely a physical one for the narrator, but also a mental one. The narrator has decided that the neighbor refuses to view things in the light of reason and is determined not to think beyond what his father has told him. The narrator feels that the neighbor has shut himself from any attempt at communication by refusing to respond to him and by smugly repeating the phrase which his father has taught him. Devices metaphor. In 917, the poem compares boulders to loaves and the balls to show their different sizes. The wall also represents the boundaries between people. In German, sentences continue to the next line without punctuation marks in line 28, 32, and 37. Assonance. Vowel sounds are repeated in words that are close together, such as the I sound in the first four lines and E sounds in the ninth line. Consonants. Constant sounds are repeated, such as the N and T sounds in line 14. Personification. In the beginning of the poem, the speaker uses personification to imply that there is something unnatural in nature that abhors wall. Themes. The main themes of Mending Wall by Robert Frost revolves around boundaries and the complexities of human relationships. The poem explores the tension between tradition and change as the speaker questions the necessity of a wall that separates him from his neighbor. Tradition versus change. The act of mending the wall each year symbolizes adherence to tradition, even when its purpose is questionable. The speaker suggests that the wall may not be needed, prompting reflection on why we maintain certain barriers. Isolation versus connection. The wall represents both physical and emotional barriers. While it keeps the neighbors apart, it also raises questions about the nature of their relationship and whether such separations are beneficial or harmful. Human nature. The poem examines the instinct to create divisions, with the neighbors' repeated assertion that good fences make good neighbors, highlighting a conventional belief that boundaries are necessary for harmonious coexistence. थैंक यू। आई होप आज की वीडियो आपको पसंद आई। कैसी लगे हमें कमेंट करके ज़रूर बताएं और आप आने वाली वीडियोस किस टॉपिक पर देखना चाहते हैं वो भी हमें कमेंट करके बताएं। अगर वीडियो अच्छी लगी तो लाइक शेयर एंड सब्सक्राइब टू माय चैनल। मिलते हैं कल एक और इन्फॉर्मेटिव वीडियो के साथ शाम 4 बजे।